Today brought a moment to take stock of 2 decades in Afghanistan. President Biden addressed the nation to mark the end of America's longest war. He again forcefully defended the decision to withdraw, claimed a messy exit was inevitable, and praised the sacrifice of service members and their families. White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor begins our coverage.
At the White House today, President Biden marked bringing America's longest war to an end.
The war in Afghanistan is now over. I'm the fourth president who has faced the issue of whether and when to end this war. When I was running for president, I made a commitment to the American people that I would end this war. And today, I've honored that commitment.
After facing fierce criticism, the president forcefully defended his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan after 20 years of fighting.
There is no evacuation from the end of a war that you can run without the kinds of complexities, challenges, and threats we faced. None. I give you my word with all of my heart. I believe this is the right decision, a wise decision, and the best decision for America.
The president also spoke about the sacrifices made by American service members, and he paid tribute to those killed over the last 2 decades, including the 13 service members who died last week.
Most of all, after 800,000 Americans serving in Afghanistan, I've traveled that whole country, brave and honorable service. After 20,744 American servicemen and women injured, and the loss of 2,461 American personnel, including 13 lives lost just this week, I refuse to open another decade of warfare in Afghanistan.
President Biden also addressed the broader global threat from terrorism in places like Syria, Somalia, and Yemen, and from groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. Both terrorist groups remain active in Afghanistan still, with deadly capabilities. He argued the U.S. had other ways to fight the groups and did not need troops on the ground.
We will maintain the fight against terrorism in Afghanistan and other countries. We just don't need to fight a ground war to do it. We have what's called over-the-horizon capabilities. And to ISIS-K, we are not done with you yet. As Commander-in-Chief, I firmly believe the best path to guard our safety and our security lies in a tough, unforgiving, targeted, precise strategy that goes after terror where it is today, not where it was 2 decades ago.
This afternoon, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, also spoke for the first time since the U.S. departure.
Today is an incredibly emotional day for any soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine and their family. Your service mattered, and it was not in vain.
Overnight, the Pentagon released this image showing the last American soldier to leave Afghanistan. Major General Chris Donahue boarded the final C-17 plane at the Kabul airport just before midnight. The U.S. aircraft dropped flares as it rose into the night, gone for good. Soon after takeoff, celebratory gunfire filled the air as Taliban fighters took the airport. In the daylight, Taliban convoys rolled across the tarmac. Their fighters walked where American troops had stood just hours earlier. Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid toured the site and spoke to fighters. He declared victory over the U.S.
The U.S. aggression was a reckless act from the beginning. Now they are defeated, and the Afghan people won the battlefield and liberated their country.
Susanna George is the Afghanistan bureau chief for the Washington Post. She is one of the last foreign journalists left in Kabul.
There weren't as many people out on the street, weren't as many cars out on the roads. Shops were open. Taliban fighters were around. They were celebrating, handing out flags, calling today an Independence Day of sorts. But the city as a whole felt very quiet.
But across Afghanistan, residents are anxious. The country is severely impoverished and heavily reliant on international aid. In the coming weeks, extreme food and cash shortages are expected to worsen.
There are no jobs. That is why the people are worried. The Taliban should try to create jobs and allow for more education.
Susanna George of The Washington Post.
People who are staying at home, who are too scared to go out on the streets, are most concerned about retaliation from the Taliban. Once there are no American troops here, they fear that the U.S. will look away from the country and that the Taliban will return to the harsh tactics that really defined their rule in the 1990s in Kabul.
Despite 2 decades of war and hostility, the Taliban spokesman said the group wants to establish diplomatic relations with the U.S. Without a military presence and with the U.S. embassy in Kabul closed, the U.S. will depend on diplomacy to evacuate the remaining Americans and Afghan allies who want to leave. But with the Taliban in control of the airport, it's not yet clear how people will get out. Back in Washington at the Capitol, Republicans continued criticizing the president for what they say was a mismanaged pullout.
We should get every American home. I believe there should be accountability for what I see as probably the biggest failure in American government on a military stage in my lifetime. And we could never make this mistake again.
Some of the last Afghans able to leave on a U.S. military flight landed today en route to Spain. They will be housed at the military base there before permanently relocating to the U.S. Meanwhile, thousands of Afghans who didn't make it out in time hope they can one day do the same. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Yamiche Alcindor.
And we will talk with the author of a new book that reveals the twists, turns, and mistakes throughout the U.S. mission in Afghanistan. That's later in the program.